Just over 12 months ago, our children at the time were aged 3 and 7 months. Our son, the youngest one, had had an extended period of illness, waking every 20 to 30 minutes through the night and needing cuddles. You know, it was quite intensive. Both his ears were infected, and he also had viral tonsillitis. It went on for about 3 weeks. Unfortunately, at that time, Darrin also got sick with a kidney infection. It was 1:30 in the morning. I was exhausted after 3 weeks of next to no sleep, and he'd fallen asleep in my arms, and as soon as I popped him back into his cot, he woke immediately and just started crying. And what happened next I'm not proud of. I yelled at him, "For the love of God, please just go to sleep." And I used an open palm and I hit the mattress side where he was lying, and as I pulled my hand across, I used 2 fingers and I tapped him on the chin. It wasn't by any means hard, but what concerned me was the fact that I had acted in frustration towards my baby, and I'd never done that before, and I knew it was because I was tired, and I knew at that point something had to change. It couldn't continue this way. So I immediately went into Darrin, told him what had happened, and I picked up the phone and I rang Plunket line to talk to somebody, to try and get a handle on what I could do to try and get his sleeping back on track.
I went through to the wee fella. He was just lying in his cot. Yeah, he was awake, but he wasn't screaming or crying or anything. He was just awake.
I spoke to a Plunket line nurse and I explained what had happened. I was really honest and disclosed that I'd acted in frustration and just exhaustion, and I'd tapped my son and just said I needed some help because we actually couldn't continue on being so exhausted, and I just needed some tips. And we had a good discussion about it, and they gave me some pointers, so we started implementing that the very next morning. I went to work on Monday, still extremely exhausted because it was quite intensive. At 4:30, just before I was about to finish work, my cell phone rang, and it was a person who identified themselves as being from an organisation called Oranga Tamariki, and that they'd had a report of concern from Plunket. My heart just dropped. I was really terrified. I thought I'd done the right thing ringing for help that night with Plunket. They were on the way to our house. They came in, explained they'd had the report of concern, and then they advised us that we needed to strip our children down to their nappies. After they left, I was really upset. I felt like I was the worst mother on the planet. I was concerned that my children were now at risk because I had a human failing and was exhausted and reacted in such a way, and then I felt like an idiot for reaching out for help. I really just needed some time out, and I told Darrin, look, I need to just get away for a couple of hours. I need to process what's just happened here. And I ended up ringing that social worker that evening because I was really frustrated about how this met their threshold, and I was upset on the phone. I was crying, and I did tell them that the fact that their organisation was involved in my children's life made me feel like a failure as a mother. At one point, the social worker asked me if I was at home, and I said, no, I'm not at home. A couple of hours later, I came home, and Darrin, as I walked in the door, said, what the hell have you said to them? So I rang them back. They were telling me that I was now a risk to my children. I could not stay in the house with them. This is 10 o'clock at night. I had to find somewhere else to be. Their reasoning for it was they thought I was going to harm myself. Apparently the conversation I'd had with them earlier, because I'd been emotional and I'd made comments that I felt like the worst mother on the planet. So I wasn't allowed to stay with my children that night. The impact for us as a family, my son was breastfed, solely breastfed. So
all of a sudden, if Amanda wasn't there, I wasn't capable of looking after the kids on my own.
Well, Darrin does it all the time when
I
go away for business.
So, I couldn't figure that one out. So I said to the lead social worker, I said, just out of curiosity, and what if I don't want you to come back? And she said, if we turn up and you don't let us in, we'll get your colleagues to escort us in. And obviously with me being in the police, to me that was a direct underlying threat.
So for 2 nights, I was not allowed to be with my children, and then for 43 nights, I had to be supervised with my children. So
just on those, probably personally on Abigail.
Mum had just been taken away.
And it really affected her, and that was what, there was a gut-wrenching to see such a beautiful wee girl just so scared and clingy and
traumatised.
It was awful. Every time Amanda went to work, guarantee the first question out of her mouth, "Daddy, is Mummy coming home?" And it would take me ages to reassure her that Mum was coming home.
Plunket have actually since apologised, and they did not follow their process. Their process is that they notify you that they have concerns and that they are mandated to raise a report of concern with the social services. You know, I still wouldn't have been happy about it, but I would have emotionally been prepared for the contact. They decided that I had to go and get a psych assessment done. Until that happened, I could not be alone with my children.
Amanda has an outgoing, independent and occasionally volatile personality. She is highly self-directed but cooperative and flexible. In the context of family illness and a dire lack of sleep, she behaved in an ill-judged way toward her baby son. She immediately took a number of different steps with her partner's involvement to improve matters. At no time did she seek to hide or minimise her behaviour. She was shocked and disappointed in herself. When suddenly confronted with a care and protection investigation, she felt briefly overwhelmed and some of her remarks were hasty. However, they were also misinterpreted. At no time was she a danger to herself or others, and neither is she now. In my opinion, Amanda presents no risk to either of her children. She is a loving and warm mother who goes to great lengths to nurture them. Oranga Tamariki should withdraw from their engagement with this family. Their statutory obligations have been fulfilled and their involvement is doing more harm than good.
So that was submitted to Oranga Tamariki, and then we sat and waited to hear from them. So this whole time I'm having to have a support person, a babysitter in the house with me. I still wasn't allowed to be alone with my children. They'd had this report for nearly 3 weeks. The psych assessment, it said that I had a sometimes volatile personality. They took that one word and they have put that forward as being the reason that they had grounds to still be involved. One word. They ignored everything else that report said about how nurturing I was as a mother, how safe my children were around me. It ignored all of that and focused on one word as a justification for them to continue to be involved. And they emailed us requesting a meeting, and I emailed them back and said, look, we have no interest in actually meeting with you. You have a conclusion, you've reached the outcome. Email that through to us. You've got the psych report, you know there is no harm to my children. This needs to end. The next day, Darrin got a phone call from the senior sergeant of the child protection team.
He said, I've just had a phone call from OT wanting our assistance to do a forced entry into your house. I said, I beg your pardon? And he goes, they believe that you've withdrawn and not communicating. Amanda, being proactive, records everything. Yeah, she sent away all the emails, all the correspondence. That
poor senior sergeant, man, it was like an email bomb. I sent him everything I had. So he contacted them back and said that the New Zealand police were not going to be involved, and they were not going to do a forced entry to our property because they didn't believe it met their threshold, did it? Because our children clearly weren't at risk. And he had looked at the same information that Oranga Tamariki had all these weeks. So after 45 days, they closed the case. Look, I, as a mother, recognise I didn't operate in the standard I hold myself to that night. I was tired, I acted out of exhaustion and frustration, and I recognised at the time that wasn't right. I wish I could believe I did the right thing that night, ringing Plunket. Because of what happened, I don't feel I did. It felt purely punitive. There was no support. You know, in a society where we should be encouraging people to reach out for help, I don't know about Darrin, but I am terrified I will not reach out for help again. It's that simple, because I'm scared about what that might entail. We should be supporting parents, not punishing them when they stumble sometimes.